Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast. And today I'm going to do my review of AEW's Collision. Starting off the evening, we have Tony Khan starting the show. Tony Khan is backstage. He announces the firing of CM Punk. CM Punk is no longer with the company, and it looks like the Punk era has ended in AEW. A couple things I want to say about this whole incident with CM Punk, and I will talk more about this towards the end of the podcast. I mentioned this multiple times in the past when it pertains to CM Punk coming back to AEW and what's been going on as of late with CM Punk. I mean, when CM Punk returned to AEW after the Brawl Out, Collision was created, brought in CM Punk. You know, I kind of figured maybe this would be a second chance for CM Punk, and I think Tony Khan had the same impression about CM Punk when he came back to AEW, that this was going to be a fresh start for Punk. He was going to be away from the Elite and Kenny Omega, and there'll be no ties at the moment, or for a while at least, between the Elite and CM Punk. So they made Collision, brought in CM Punk. They also brought back Ace Steel, and Ace Steel was a producer for Collision. And then weeks went on in, and then we had that, off-air promo that he cut on Adam Page, which was a small incident compared to what he did at All In. And then we get into All In, and then there was an incident between him and Jack Perry. And then there was more news that came out that CM Punk actually lunged at Tony Khan backstage at All In, which this also resulted in CM Punk getting fired from AEW. Was this time overdue for CM Punk? I think so. I think CM Punk was trying to do everything he could to possibly get fired from the company. Even with the altercation that happened at All In, he approached Tony Khan backstage, got face to face with Tony Khan and told him he quits. More stuff took place backstage at All In, which again resulted in CM Punk getting fired. Like I said, I will touch more base on this towards the end of the podcast, but it is official. CM Punk is officially fired from All Elite Wrestling. Moving on for the rest of the night, we have Ricky Starks. He has a segment, talks with Tony Schiavone. Ricky Starks talks about challenging Ricky Steamboat to a strap match at All Out. Starks then talks about starting over and rebuilding himself back up on the roster. Ricky then praises Big Bill, talks about the struggles that Big Bill had to go through up to this point, and that he has a lot of respect for Big Bill. Starks then talks about All In and how it affected him by missing the show. Ricky then calls out Ricky Steamboat. Steamboat is here with a contract. Ricky Steamboat then mocks Ricky Starks. Steamboat has a contract in hand. Ricky Starks then he had signed a contract, but when you look at the contract, it says Ricky Starks versus the Dragon. Now, this is also a nickname of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, but it didn't say Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, it just said Dragon. After Ricky Starks had signed the contract, Bryan Danielson, his music hits, he comes down to the ring, and Bryan Danielson signs the contract, and now we're going to get Danielson versus Starks at All Out in a no disqualification strap match at All Out. And I'm all for this, man. Number one, it's great to see Danielson back. He's been out with injury ever since the match he had with Okada at the Forbidden Door. And it's great to see him back, man. I mean, obviously, everybody was still upset about the whole CM Punk issue. Seeing Bryan Danielson come back to challenge Ricky Starks, absolutely awesome. And again, this is one of those matches on All Out that I'm definitely looking forward to between Bryan Danielson and Ricky Starks. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. Is a Trios Championship matchup. It is Daniel Garcia teaming up with Matt Menard and Angelo Parker versus the Acclaimed. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between both teams with the Acclaimed keeping the pace of the match. Hager is here. He ends up attacking the Acclaimed. Garcia then applies a Dragon Slayer, but the hold is broken. Billy Gunn then hits a Famouser on Matt Menard. And then Max Caster ultimately hits a mic drop, pins for the 3. And your winners of the match and still Trios champions are the Acclaimed. Hats off to the Acclaimed for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It's a tag team matchup. It is Aussie Open versus Nick Wayne and the Commander. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between both teams with Aussie Open keeping the pace of the match. Nick Wayne then hits a frog splash off the top rope for a near fall, but Aussie Open ultimately hit the finish, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Aussie Open. Hats off to Aussie Open for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we have a Dennis Rodman segment. Schiavone asks why Rodman is in AEW, but before he says anything, he's interrupted by Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal. Jarrett then hypes up Dennis Rodman, but he also mocks Rodman as well. Jarrett mentions the past with Rodman as well as NWO. He makes references to the NWO. Jarrett then was trying to recruit Rodman to his family. Rodman then grabs a microphone and mentions how long it's been since he's been in Chicago. It's been 13 years since Rodman's been in Chicago. Rodman then mocks Shaq, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. Then the Acclaim come down to the ring, call out Jarrett and his family, and it looks like at the 0 hour at All Out, we're going to get the Acclaim defending the Trios Championships against Jarrett, Lethal, and I believe Sanjay Dutt at the 0 hour at All Out this weekend. So I'm definitely looking forward to that matchup as well. Hopefully the Acclaimed retain the Trios Championships. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the Outcast versus Sheeta, Statlander, and Baker. I thought it was a good match, back and forth matchup between both teams with the Outcast keeping the pace of the match. But Ruby ultimately hits the finish, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are the Outcast. Hats off to the Outcast for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Powerhouse Hobbs versus GPA. This was a glorified squash match, with Hobbs pretty much keeping the pace and Hobbs quickly hitting the finish on GPA, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Powerhouse Hobbs. After the match, Miro comes down to the ring, attacks Powerhouse Hobbs, which is pretty much setting up their match, if you will, at All Out. But hats off to Powerhouse Hobbs for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of AEW's Collision. It is Dax Harwood versus Jay White. I thought this was a great match. Back and forth matchup between Harwood and White, with Dax Harwood keeping the pace of the match. Dax then hits a pile driver for a near fall on Jay White. Harwood then hits a slingshot powerbomb on Jay White in the middle of the ring. Dax Harwood then applies a sharpshooter, but the hold is broken. Jay White then hits a Blade Runner, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is Jay White. After the match, Bullet Club Gold end up attacking Cash Wheeler. Young Bucks end up showing up to save FTR. So this was also the first time that the Young Bucks were actually on Collision, which is ironic since the firing of CM Punk. A couple of things I want to say about Collision, and I will get into the whole, my thoughts on CM Punk here in a minute as well. Number one, Collision was a solid show. I was very surprised with the return of Bryan Danielson. I didn't think we were going to see Danielson to at least October, possibly Wrestle Dream, which takes place October 1st in Seattle, Washington, for pay-per-view. So I was a little shocked and taken back to see Bryan Danielson on Collision last night. And he has a great match to look forward to with Ricky Starks at All Out. All in all, it was a solid show. Dennis Rodman showing up last night, not needed. It's kind of funny because when it was announced that Dennis Rodman was going to be on Collision, I felt like it was kind of funny because I think Tony Khan was trying to do everything he could not to be WCW, and this is the first time we've seen Dennis Rodman on a wrestling, television since his time in WCW when he was teaming up with Hogan in the NWO, or should I say an honorary member of the NWO. So I thought the Dennis Rodman segment was kind of cringe. I don't know why it was really needed. But he's going to be a part of the match with the Acclaimed and Jarrett, Lethal, and Dutt for the Trios Championship. Dennis Rodman will be in the corner of the Acclaimed. Dax Harwood, Jay White main event. It was a solid main event. I was very surprised and taken back by seeing the Young Bucks show up on Collision. Again, especially due to the fact that CM Punk was actually fired from AEW. Then we had the Young Bucks showing up, literally on Collision. The day it was announced that he was fired. So I thought that was, a little too close for comfort, especially with what just happened. I thought maybe they should have waited to bring in the Young Bucks on Collision. And honestly, the other big thing too is, hats off to Tony Khan. I've been very crucial about Tony Khan as far as him, pertaining to him to be a boss in AEW and what he's done as of late with all these incidents and stuff backstage and the backstage morale. I understand that Tony Khan cannot control everything that happens backstage. There's a lot of things on this guy's plate on a daily basis when it pertains to just pro wrestling. It doesn't include, the things he does for the Jacksonville Jaguars, everything else like that. I mean, there's a lot of things on this guy's plate on a consistent basis. I mean, you're running, Collision, Dynamite, Rampage, and as well as Ring of Honor, all these pay-per-views, everything else like that. There's a lot of stuff on this guy's plate. And with the situation with CM Punk, I mean, there was an investigation between Jack Perry and CM Punk, the incident that happened at All In backstage. And more information came out. I mean, there was comments that were saying that CM Punk had lunged at Tony Khan to, I guess, hit Tony Khan. And this was one of the things, a key point in the reason why he was let go of his contract and ultimately fired from the company and will no longer be in AEW. There was another rumor that CM Punk wanted a meeting with the Elite at All In, and the Elite refused to have this meeting with CM Punk. I mean, it's been so much news and rumors coming out when it pertains to this whole CM Punk issue, man. And to be honest with you, my final thoughts on CM Punk is I personally think he did everything he possibly could to get fired from this company. And, and the other thing, too, is a lot of people were saying that, Jack Perry needs to be fired. No. This was the first incident in, 4 years, that we've known of Jack Perry having an incident backstage within AEW. This was the first time he messed up, and everybody's like, you know what, he needs to be fired too. No. Now, does he need to be reprimanded for what he did? Sure. A fine, a suspension, 30-day suspension, fine, sure. Absolutely. I'm not saying that Jack Perry shouldn't be held accountable for what he did. But in no way, shape, or form was it, even remotely close to what CM Punk was doing backstage at All In. When he's throwing stuff around, getting in the faces of talent, causing issues on a consistent basis, and then ultimately getting in the face of your boss and lunging at your boss, he couldn't expect to keep his job after what he did to Tony Khan. I'm glad that Tony Khan stepped up to the plate, and Tony Khan, making the announcement of, him, AEW releasing CM Punk. I mean, even in that comments that he made, it felt like Tony Khan was fearful of his safety. He was also worried about the talent backstage when it pertains to CM Punk snapping backstage, and the safety and the workers that work within AEW that are not just, solely talent. It came down to a committee as well as with Tony Khan to make this final decision of firing CM Punk. And you know what? I think it was well overdue. I truly believe that he tried to do everything in his power to get fired from the company. He was doing the same thing multiple times to poke the bear in AEW. I mean, and at this point, I mean, even before it was announced that he got fired, I started thinking, what else can Tony Khan really, truly do to not only protect AEW, but give CM Punk a chance in AEW and stay on AEW. I'm sure it was something where Tony Khan didn't want to fire CM Punk because it's money, and he brought in money. There's a lot of CM Punk elitists out there that, ride or die for CM Punk. And, ironically, this is a tough week for, Tony Khan. I mean, you fire one of your biggest stars on the roster, and you're in his hometown. You're in Chicago, Illinois. You have a pay-per-view literally tonight for All Out, and it's in Chicago, Illinois, at the United Center. So, that is a tall task to, get over, to be honest with you. And I think Tony Khan is trying to do whatever he can to move past this issue with CM Punk and move forward. And I think the company is going to prosper from it, man, to be honest with you. I don't think, there should be that much backstage morale anymore, to be honest with you. And now the fact that Punk is gone, you're going to see the Elite on Collision and on Dynamite, more storylines being built. This kind of opens a door for, creative, to be honest with you. I think, when it pertains to CM Punk and Tony Khan, especially creatively, I think Tony Khan's hands were tied. I don't think really there was a lot of things he could do for CM Punk creatively for the foreseeable future. I mean, obviously the biggest match that was left on the table in my eye for CM Punk, if he was still with the company, is have a winner-takes-all match between CM Punk and MJF. Obviously CM Punk at the time was walking around with the real World Championship, and MJF was walking around with the, AEW World Championship. That was a story that was writing itself, and probably one of the most, high-profile matches that AEW could deliver in the near future. And now we're never going to get that. With that being said, man, am I happy that he's gone? Of course not. I'm not going to sit here and say any man should, anybody, man or woman, should lose their job. I'm not saying that. But am I happy for the fact that this might possibly change AEW and the roster backstage and everything else and the morale that, hey, if this, hopefully with what happened with CM Punk, if this continues, there's the door. This is a time where, okay, well, CM Punk is gone, and a lot of people were claiming that he was the issue, he was the problem. Well, let's see what happens in the next few months. Is there going to be still backstage problems or everything else? Is fingers are going to start being pointed back at Tony Khan? that maybe it wasn't just CM Punk causing the issues, maybe it was everybody else as well causing these issues, and they were being overshadowed by CM Punk. I mean, it's still yet to be up in the air, man, on what's going to happen. I mean, do I think the issues between AEW and CM Punk are far from over? No. I still think CM Punk is going to do things towards AEW. I'm sure there's lawsuits coming down the pike for Tony Khan. From what I understand, I think Tony Khan's not... Someone had told me that Tony Khan is not actually going to buy him out of his contract or give him his remaining money on his contract or something like that. It was something crazy. And that Tony, obviously CM Punk was going to fight it and, sue AEW. I'm sure there's going to be lawsuits coming down the pike for AEW and Tony Khan when it pertains to this whole CM Punk issue. I'm sure it's going to happen. But all in all, do I think it's better for the roster? Yeah, I do. I mean, you can't expect to lunge at your boss and keep your job. And that goes for whether it's pro wrestling or any other job out there. I mean, you can't lunge at your boss and expect to keep your job. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, he was just defending himself. Look, man, at the end of the day, when that comment was made by Jack Perry, and Perry walked backstage after his match at the 0 Hour against Hook, when he walked backstage, CM Punk was waiting for Jack Perry to come backstage and get in his face and have an altercation. Then he puts Jack Perry in a chokehold, everything else, and has to be breaking up, and then Punk gets mad and upset, and then he gets mad at Tony Khan and lunges at Tony Khan. Look, man, and again, this goes hand in hand with what I said earlier about Jack Perry. A lot of people are saying Jack Perry should be fired. I don't believe so. I don't. This was the first time that you heard anything about Jack Perry as far as any kind of backstage nonsense since, he's been on the roster for AEW. And he's one of the, originals of AEW. The first time you heard anything of Jack Perry. There's been multiple issues pertaining to CM Punk since he's been in AEW. Multiple incidents and issues pertaining to the Elite, pertaining to Tony Khan, pertaining to Colt Cabana. I mean, the list goes on. And it gets to a point where you have to look in the mirror and be like, what, maybe this is not the best thing for my company. And I'm talking solely about Tony Khan here. And again, kudos to Tony Khan. Tony Khan finally made a boss decision and had the audacity to announce it on national television that they had fired CM Punk and enough was enough. So again, this was the first time I've seen Tony Khan be a boss and step up to the plate and do the right thing, not only for AEW, but the roster and the fans. And honestly, for what it's worth, man, people were getting tired of, at least I was, and I know there's other people that I personally know of that were just getting tired of seeing CM Punk in the headlines, man. It was like every single week you would constantly see CM Punk issue, CM Punk issue, CM Punk said this, CM Punk did that. It was getting old, and the well was running dry. And I told you guys from the get-go, with bringing back CM Punk, is the juice worth the squeeze? And obviously, I was correct. It wasn't worth it. It was causing more turmoil than anything else. It brought in money. It brought in revenue for the company. I'm not saying it didn't. Was it a good business move from Tony Khan? Yes, absolutely. When this guy hasn't wrestled at the time in 8 years, he's the biggest free agent on the market. You're not going to not go for a talent like that. I'm not saying CM Punk is not a talented wrestler. I'm not saying that, he's not, a high-quality talent. I'm not saying that he's not. But the backstage morale, the attitude, the trying to one-up somebody, everything else like that on a consistent basis. I mean, look what the whole incident with Adam Page. I mean, he was upset with Adam Page because he didn't take his recommendation seriously. He doesn't have to. And CM Punk wants to be a locker room leader. Man, look, even when he was in WWE, he wasn't a locker room leader. And you're trying to me, CM Punk was trying to do his best to play the victim and then still be an asshole. That's to me, I can't put it any more bluntly than that. I mean, he walked around that locker room like he ran the show. 100%. And there's nobody else that can change my mind. And for the longest, and it's not just me saying this, man, there's been multiple people that have said this same comment. Who is running this company? Is it Tony Khan or is it CM Punk? And for the longest time, up to yesterday, we all thought it was Tony Khan. Now, we were all also under the assumption that, and again, we didn't know the fact that CM Punk had lunged at Tony Khan. Before that comment was made, and that evidence came out, everybody assumed that, okay, this is going to be something where, CM Punk is finally going to get reprimanded again. He's going to get a 30-day suspension, suspended without pay for 30 days and comes back. No. Tony Khan finally made the right decision in firing CM Punk. How much more leverage can you give this man before things get worse or we have another brawl-out situation? Because it was almost similar to All In. Only thing that was different is that he wasn't behind a microphone, complaining about the EVPs and everything else. This was a physical brawl that took place between him and Jack Perry, which also led to CM Punk lunging at Tony Khan, which is his boss, the CEO of All Elite Wrestling. You couldn't expect to keep your job after you did that. So I truly believe, and I will stand by this, and I will die on this hill, that CM Punk was trying to do whatever he could ever since the brawl-out situation to get fired. Because it was it was every other week there was some kind of issue. Whether it was Paige. I mean, he made comments about Paige that happened over a year ago. And you're still making comments about Paige. Let it go. And people were like, oh, well, CM Punk, he's trying to defend himself. Defend himself on what? He was the one that attacked Jack Perry. Perry made the comment. Okay, yeah, he made the comment. Then you talk to the man backstage. Don't put the man in a headlock and looking for a fight on a consistent basis. And no offense to CM Punk, everybody's like, oh, he was a trained fighter. Look, man, I watched UFC. I told many of my fans this. I watched UFC. I've been watching MMA for a very long time. That man ain't no fighter. Okay? He got in the UFC. He trained under Duke Rufus in Milwaukee. It's a great camp. It's a great team. They've had great fighters come through that camp. Number one being the most notable, I think, is Anthony Showtime Pettis. It's a great camp. He came into the UFC. Why? Because of the name of who he was. He was out of his WWE contract. He contacted Dana White, or Dana White contacted CM Punk. CM Punk was in the crowd for, I think it was a UFC fight night. And then Dana White announced the signing of Phil Brooks, a.k.a. CM Punk. He got in the UFC, didn't even win a damn fight. And on top of that, the guy that he fought the first time had to go back and legally try to change the decision of his fight because of what CM Punk did. So stop with that whole morale stuff, man. I mean, look, at the end of the day, Tony Khan felt for his safety when it pertains to CM Punk and that issue that happened at All In. CM Punk, whether he wants to bully himself around, you can't be waiting for talent to come back and constantly want to pick a fight with talent. It's not a good look for AEW. It's not a good look for Tony Khan. It's an issue. It was an ongoing issue with CM Punk that was not changing, and obviously it was progressively getting worse. From Brawl Out to him making comments off air about Adam Page, comments about Jack Perry, about a spot with using real glass, and then Jack Perry makes a comment at All In, which was their biggest show to date since the entire time AEW's been in existence. It was their biggest show at All In. Almost 82,000 seats sold. Perry makes a comment on the 0 hour about pertaining to the glass spot. He makes a comment. CM Punk's, the next match after Perry, he starts All In, the official pay-per-view. And he waits for Jack Perry to come backstage and gets in his face and then puts him in a headlock. And then CM Punk lunges at Tony Khan, screaming and yelling, I quit, and everything else like that. He was trying to do everything he could to get fired. Period. End. And to be honest with you, like I told y'all, the juice was not worth the squeeze. It wasn't. He was a detrimental part of, or an issue, I should say, to All Elite Wrestling. That's just the bottom line of it. And it's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. Again, there's a lot of people out there that are fans of CM Punk. I was a fan of CM Punk. I think what he did in WWE was fantastic. The infamous pipe bomb, the matches that he had, his mic skills were awesome. He's known for the pipe bomb. And the great matches that he's had. Matches he had with Cena. Matches he had with Taker. Matches he's had with, just the endless amount of talent that he's wrestled on WWE. And he's had good matches in AEW. I mean, the most notable match he had in AEW was obviously him versus MJF. And then you have him and Adam Page. There was a lot of good matches for CM Punk in All Elite Wrestling. But it just, ego's gotten away. I truly believe CM Punk has the biggest ego in the world. I mean, it's just, it was time overdue, man. It really was. I mean, like I said, from the Brawl Out to, him calling out the EVPs, calling out Colt Cabana, calling out Tony Khan, calling out Adam Page, then calling out Jack Perry, then having an incident backstage which resulted in a fight with him and Jack Perry, and then Punk lunging at Tony Khan. Enough was enough, man. And not only that, I really do mean this. It is an absolute damn shame that Tony Khan and AEW put on this big event in Wembley Stadium in front of almost 82,000 people. Big, really big stadium. And the fans, really were the highlight of the show. But this was the biggest show of all time. And the funny thing is no one's really talking about how important All In was, because CM Punk's incident that he had backstage took away the spotlight from all the other talent that were on that show at All In, and what it meant for the company and meant for the fans. He made it all about himself after All In was all said and done. And that's all. And ever since All In, everybody's been talking about CM Punk leading up to him getting fired now. I mean, it's crazy, man. It's absolutely crazy. But again, I didn't think he was going to get fired until I found out about the whole, him lunging at Tony Khan. But I truly believe that, at the end of it, at the core of it, CM Punk tried to do everything he possibly could to get fired. I think CM Punk was done with the company, and he was done with AEW. And even if that wasn't the case, I don't think there was anything more for Tony Khan to do when it pertains to CM Punk and trying to make Punk feel comfortable in AEW. I mean, he's gave him his own show, pretty much his own talent that he wants to work with, talent that Punk was comfortable working with. He didn't have to work with the Elite. He was still in high-profile matches. I mean, there was nothing much more that Tony Khan could do to please CM Punk at this point. And it was, time was up, man. And Tony Khan finally, made a decision as a boss. And after all the situations that happened with CM Punk, he finally made a decision to fire CM Punk, and CM Punk is no longer All Elite. But with that being said, this is my review of AEW's Collision. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.